So I guess they decided to end the first season of the Third Doctor with a bang. This was an episode that's certainly one of the few, very few, that explored an aspect of science fiction that other franchises explored all the time, most notably Star Trek. But Doctor Who, in fact, I think other than this one, I think the new Who with what happened with Rose and everything, and that version of the Cybermen and all that, is the idea of the parallel universe, the multiverse and whatnot. And this episode explores that for the Doctor, but then it's just never revisited until New Who, as far as I remember. So this one, once again, UNIT is basically providing security for a very important project in search of new energy sources by drilling into the Earth's core. But oh boy. When will humanity learn to leave well enough alone? Yes, you're dealing with forces you don't understand. And well, basically, once you push through the Earth's crust, some green slime comes out and turns people into green werewolves, who are extremely hot. No, I don't mean sexy. I mean they radiate heat, and they can't stand anything cold, and they have to stay in this incredible heat and all that. So that's the big mess. But it also apparently will doom the planet to absolute destruction. So the project's going along. The Doctor is only really interested in it because he wants to use the power source of the nuclear reactor they're using for his own experiment on the TARDIS console. So he brings out the console from out of the TARDIS, and it's in this garage. For a minute there, it almost looks as if the Doctor figured out the chameleon circuit and was able to turn the TARDIS into, yes, a garage. But no, he just has the console there where he's experimenting on the trying to unlock the TARDIS so that he can travel again. Because after War Games, the Time Lords put a lock on it. They put a boot and grounded the TARDIS on it, and he can't figure out how to do it because they also blocked his ability to figure it out in his mind. He's still trying to get around that, and that's what he's experimenting on. Meanwhile, of course, there's an arrogant and obsessive director of the whole project who's determined to get it done no matter what warning signs they see that there's a problem. And you're beginning to see the problems happen. Meanwhile, the Doctor works on his experiment, and it goes wrong, and it pushes him into a parallel universe rather than going through forward and backward in time. He ends up there. Now, we'd seen him experiment in earlier episodes where he did go forward, but it was only like for a few seconds, just that sort of thing. So he just can't figure out how to crack it, and he never does, actually. But anyway, so he goes into a parallel universe, and here Britain is ruled by some sort of fascist government, and he sees different versions, darker versions, if you will, of his friends from UNIT. So Brigadier is now brigade leader, and he lost an eye for some reason, and so he has an eye patch. Elizabeth Shaw is she either dyed her hair or we don't know which version. Either she is a redhead or she dyed it that way, and her real hair is brunette or whatever. But she had a short hairdo in this version, and she's basically just another soldier in brigade leader's little army there. And Benton, well, he's still Benton. He's just more of an a-hole and a bully, but pretty much the same guy. And there's doubles of the other people, the staff of the project there, and the same thing is happening. Those guys are all pretty much the same. Their clothing is different. The director doesn't have a goatee in this version, but the same events, are happening. And the green slime affects him, which is odd because other people who got the green slime or were touched by one of the other green werewolves, they started to turn pretty quick. Whereas the director, throughout the entire series, almost to the last bit, takes forever for him to transform into a green werewolf. But you just needed him to be that way. Maybe it's because his contact with it wasn't complete It was in a container, and he foolishly grabbed it to put it back in a box or what have you. And maybe that's why you just have to kind of fill in the blank there to figure out why it took him so long to eventually turn into the green werewolf. But there you go. Oh, with the upshot about it was that the guy was bald or balding, but once he turned into the green werewolf, he had a thick, full head of hair. Huh? Yeah, that's you're a crazy monster, and the world's ending. But man, that's some thick hair there. So, Liz, of course, in the original version, she still hasn't found her pants. In the other version, a bit more of a proper outfit. Look, it was the times, And so the Doctor is frustrated on both sides. Of course, they don't initially believe him, and they never really would have, but, what are you going to do? But eventually, his details, at first they think he's a spy, but then they're like, well, the guy seems to know what he's doing. And but they're further along in their project to drill through to the Earth's core, and all hell breaks loose, and they've got green werewolves everywhere. And they finally begin to believe the Doctor's story about coming from another universe. And of course, brigade leader says, well, you can save us all, and we can go back with you. And he says, no, I can't. And that would disrupt the rules of the cosmos and stuff. Yeah, I would have thought that the Doctor would find a way, but apparently you can't. If one person from a parallel universe comes into your universe, it destroys the universe, except the Doctor went into their universe. So I guess you have to conclude there is no Doctor. He didn't have a double. You could have just assumed he was somewhere else in that version of the universe, but for whatever reason, maybe he's dead already and he just doesn't exist. Therefore, the universes don't collapse or whatever. So yeah, that wasn't all that well thought out, but it's a fun and interesting thing to do. And some people do it better, but the idea of the multiverse and parallel universes, this is your one shot to get a look at it. But apparently it leaves the notion that their experiment goes wrong, the core bursts open, and you got people turning into green werewolves, and then just lava bursting out all over the place. And it seems to be left at that Earth was doomed to die and all this sort of thing. However, you could have said the main problem was localized right there at the site, and it did devastate the Earth, and you had green werewolves running around. But it could have been a thing that a future Doctor Who adventure could have revisited that world that has roaming bands of green werewolves and stuff like that. But they never did. So I guess you'd have to say, well, it all blew up. And the Doctor does manage to get back to his universe, and he's in a bit of a state there. He's in a coma at first, and he's very upset, and he violently attacks the machinery and desperately trying to convince them they've got to stop the drilling. And you have to understand that he's in that state not just because he was damaged in the trip over, but he watched versions of Liz Shaw, and the brigade leader already got himself killed. But nevertheless, he watched them burn alive as he's transporting back to the other universe. So he's desperate to avoid this. So he's in a bad state at that point. And, of course, he is successful, but not before the director does turn into the green werewolf. But fortunately, he's pretty much the only one at that point, and they're able to prevent the doomsday scenario that happened to the other Earth. And then, they have a good laugh at the Brigadier's expense. The Doctor is now convinced that he can restore the TARDIS, and he disappears. But all he did was teleport himself into a trash dump, and they have a good laugh about it and all that. And the end. Well, this was the last time we'll see Liz Shaw in the next season, which each episode gets closer and closer to pretty much what the Pertwee era is known for. And, of course, in the next season is where Jo is introduced. And Jo really is the main companion for the Third Doctor. I know Sarah comes in, but Joe kind of set a standard for what the Pertwee era is. And, of course, that other very notable recurring character, the Master, will arrive in the next season and the next episode. But Inferno, of course, is an interesting one. And, again, because it's kind of alone, more or less, in that it explores that idea. And then they never go there again. I don't know why, but they just didn't. So, Inferno. Sure, there's some flaws here and there, but I'm sure it's fair to assume that it must have been a fun episode to do, especially for Nicholas Courtney and Carolyn John, I believe, played Liz Shaw, because they get to play different versions of themselves, and they're very different, and it's quite a bit of a departure from what they were used to playing. And it's also more detailing of the relationship between the Doctor and the Brigadier, and this more of the establishment of that, and how pivotal and essential the Brigadier was, and pretty much is, because he casts a bit of a shadow over the Doctor, and it will come up from time to time, because this was a very different era for the Doctor, a very different time in his life, instead of just running around from adventure to adventure, which is pretty much what it's been ever since. But this one, where he was pretty much stuck, and yet adventure found him. Yes it did. All right, thank you for watching and listening. We'll do it again soon with another adventure of the Third Doctor. But until then, I'll bid you sweet adieu. But before you go, check out that link description below. That'll take you to my mini stores that have plenty of goodies for you.